All right, ladies and gentlemen, it is time for another episode of the Movie Commentary Podcast. It's the podcast in which we watch movies and we talk about them. And for today, we have a little bit of a treat for y'all. I'm doing a movie recommended to me by a good friend of mine. We're going to be watching the 1982 Steven Spielberg classic. I mean, everybody knows which is E.T., starring Henry Thomas, Drew Barrymore, Robert MacNaughton, Dee Wallace, who's the mom, and then Peter Coyote, who's the government agent Keys. And again, this is recommended to me by a good friend of mine named Kelly, and she was really wanting me to do something Spielbergian. And she said that E.T. was a personal favorite of hers, so that's what I'll do. So without further ado, let us start E.T. And I really like it. Starting it off here, it's the E.T. is distributed by Universal Studios, and it comes with in at least the Blu-ray version that I'm watching. It comes with the original the original Universal logo, which you don't see a whole lot anymore. Actually, never don't see that anymore. Actually, so. And then we have the opening credits here. One of the interesting things, so kind of the impetus, the origins of E.T., it kind of started off with Steven Spielberg wanting to do kind of a story. It had a lot of different kind of inspirations and kind of things where they pulled like interesting story features from. And one of the interesting things I've learned about Steven Spielberg, is that he had a very lonely childhood. I mean, I think it was about 1960, he had his family divorced, his parents divorced, and something I've been through myself. And I could imagine it was really challenging for him. I mean, he had from his own personal recollections, he had a very lonely childhood. In fact, actually, according to one of the stories, he actually created an alien imaginary friend as like a coping mechanism for it. And so that obviously is something that he even said his personal inspiration. Like he wanted to tell a story about his own lonely childhood growing up, and the story of his parents' divorce. And then also kind of coupled with the fact that, and then another inspiration came from when he was directing Close Encounters of the Third Kind. Steven Spielberg has, two early, alien movies. I believe it's Close Encounters and E.T. It's actually kind of funny. He's been really reluctant to make any other movies with the Extra Terrestrials, but one of the things at the end of Close Encounters, that he was talking about is the idea that the extraterrestrial that when they finally meet the ship at the end when you meet the aliens at the end of the movie, Steven Spielberg kind of had an idea of, well, what if that alien, what if they don't leave? What if they don't go back into the ship? What if they stay on Earth? Like one of the things that he said was, what if they're like a foreign exchange student kind of thing? And so that was ultimately kind of the part of the inspiration. And then kind of, and then and then it was during the making of Raiders of the Lost Ark, I believe in about 1979, 1980, was when they really started to put this all together. And that was really an interesting time for Spielberg because he was, while making Raiders, it was one of those globe-trotting, productions that he was making. And apparently he had been taken far away from his family. He was kind of lonely when they were making the movie. So, and kind of during that, during the making of Raiders, he gave it the story of E.T. to I believe a production assistant on Raiders, a woman by the name of Melissa Matheson, who interestingly was dating Harrison Ford at the time, the actor that played Han Solo and Indiana Jones. And she essentially would, she essentially was putting the script of E.T. together while they were filming Raiders of the Lost Ark. So when they finished Raiders, they actually essentially went straight into, took a little bit of a break in between Raiders and then went into making E.T. So that's kind of some of the impetus behind it. Spielberg's and Spielberg even himself says it's the most personal film he's ever made. It's probably one of his most rewarding films he's ever made because he even says it himself. I mean, it's probably probably his best movie that he's at least personally made. He never thought he'd make a movie as good as E.T. So a lot of talking there. So basically, during the movie, you could see the extraterrestrials. They've landed on Earth within their spaceship, and now, and you can see that one of them is going out exploring, and as we see, these are these extraterrestrials. They're botanists. They don't really say it explicitly, but you could see in their spaceship they had different plant plant lives and plant substances. You could see E.T. here talking about going around kind of exploring the different plant lives, because we're up in the I don't know exactly what kind of forest this is. I would guess the redwood forest, something in California. This movie takes place out in California. And now we get E.T.'s little chest, his heart chest thingy starts to light up, which tells him that, which alerts then you have these government agents that come out, and then he starts to run. And first instance of many, the music in this movie is absolutely stunning. The music here really puts the hair up on your back and really brings chills to your kind of down your spine. So now the interesting thing about this is, and Spielberg had the opportunity to revisit this scene when he re-released the movie for the 20th anniversary. One of the things that he did was he wanted to change a lot of scenes of E.T., and this was a scene right here that he changed, because you see E.T. is running back towards his ship, and in the new 20th anniversary edition, they changed his run cycle to where he's more of hopping, running with his arms and whatnot. Because in this scene here, you can even see it. You don't see the top half of E.T. You can literally see his little light thing. It's just a light on a track, just kind of running, just kind of going across there, and it doesn't look very you can see the outline. It doesn't look like him at all. And then the scene right here where the spaceship's flying away, and it leaves him behind. They changed the lights on the spaceship, and some of the scenes of E.T. So now the spaceship has left him, and he is all alone. So now he is going down to the little. I don't know exactly what city this is. They filmed E.T. all across different parts of California and different neighborhoods of Los Angeles. But they never specifically state, what part of... You can imagine it's in California, but they don't really say what part of California it's in. Now, the really interesting thing about this, and this is something I learned through, watching making-of documentaries of this movie, Steven Spielberg was... some of the inspiration behind this movie was was to make a movie kind of through a kid's, point of view. And one of the things that he didn't want was he didn't want there to be any kind of he didn't want to have any adults present. You kind of want it to be like a Tom and Jerry kind of movie, or maybe like a Charlie Brown kind of movie where you don't really see you can only see the legs of the characters, and you don't really see you don't see the adult characters. But and in that early scene there, you could see kind of the silhouettes of the government officials coming out and investigating the strange happenings and all that kind of stuff. And you see that you get introduced to the Keys character, because you can, the keys that are on his little belt buckle there. And one of the things, sorry, I'm laughing at one of the scenes here. One of the things that Spielberg was wanted to do is he didn't want to show any of the adult characters, and the only adult character that you see in the first half of the movie, and again we'll kind of hit on this a little later. The only adult character you see in the first half of the movie is the mom, the Dee Wallace character, and you don't really. And even from that, you Steven Spielberg even said, well, she's just basically like a little kid, like a kid in herself. So, and we are meeting. So now we've gone to the house. We're meeting. We've met Elliot, met his brother, and then his brother's friends who are playing the Dungeons and Dragons game. And then Elliot, also, meeting Elliot. We kind of see that at first that Elliot's a little, he's a bit of an outsider. I mean, he's trying to, get into play D&D with his brother's friends, and, they're not really letting him play and all that kind of stuff. So, again, it's just kind of that, it's, a very autobiographical film, I believe, of, Spielberg's is, the fact of a lonely child, and kind of how, he thinks that I'm pretty sure he saw a lot of himself in Elliot, when Spielberg was a child. So, and Elliot just threw the baseball into the tool shed, and the ball just came out. So, and now Elliot's. I also love. One of the things about E.T. that as a somebody who's growing up, he's kind of. You can kind of see some of the hammy acting from some of the kids. I mean, and it's nothing against them. They're kids. So I mean. But like some of the scenes, like with Elliot, like Henry Thomas, where he's just kind of like yelling quiet, and he's being a kid, but at the end of the day, it is a kid. So, and nothing is in the tool shed. They're checking it out. Nothing in there. Oh, there are something. There's footprints. And you can see that, they don't really believe that they don't really believe Elliot. I think that what they said is there's like some other kind of animal that was coming over to the shed. You also can see it's kind of, I never really thought about, this in California, but you can see that there's like cornfields kind of around, and there's like, the house is kind of surrounded by like a lot of these like corn stalks. And you also notice that there was something in the tool shed there. And then now, Elliot, his dog heard something, and now Elliot, I think, hears something. Now he wants to go outside and investigate. I think that's what this scene's about. So my own personal history with E.T., when I first watched E.T., I actually watched the 20th anniversary edition of E.T., which was the, if those who don't know, it's the extended version, of E.T. that has all the, it has like, the new special effects, and it actually has some like, deleted scenes that Spielberg put back into it. And one of the things about the 20th anniversary, actually, no, I don't know where I was going with that, but 20th anniversary, that was the first edition that I saw. I remember I had the old DVD and it had the little disc that looked like the moon. And I remember always watching that first disc, because the first disc was the 20th anniversary of E.T., and then the second disc was always the 1982 theatrical cut of E.T. Now, this was before I ever knew anything about, like, different, like, editions of E.T. or, like, different editions of any other kind of movie. That kind of came when I discovered, like, the different cuts of Star Wars and and Elliot is now meeting E.T. You kind of see in the so Elliot just met E.T. You kind of see that you kind of saw in the earlier scenes there with E.T. It was kind of interesting cinematography. But like you can kind of see in some of the early scenes, like in the forest when E.T. was like running from the government officials. You didn't really see a whole lot of his face. It was really one of those, like, I think, classic tropes in, like, where you have like a creature that's going to be revealed at some point in the movie. And the one thing that they did in the start of this movie was that they actually that they would, they didn't do a whole lot of lighting on E.T. There was a lot of backlight, really shadowy. Some of the lighting that you saw was actually the character was really far away, so you didn't really see him a whole lot. So you couldn't really see him up close to that well. And so there was that. But then that scene that we just saw of Elliot right here. You saw that where Elliot was in the corn stalks and he flashed his light onto E.T. You could see him lit up, and you kind of saw what his face looked like. But it was really quick cuts. You didn't quick cuts between him, quick cuts between Elliot. You didn't really see a whole lot of what was going on there. So. And now you have Elliot seeing from afar the Keys character played by Peter Coyote. And Peter Coyote looks like he's looking for the creature. One of the things actually that was really interesting about the movie, or about the making of the movie, was that. And we literally just saw it in the opening in the scene just now, where Elliot was going out looking for he was kind of like putting down Reese's Pieces kind of as bait for the character for E.T. One of the things I believe they actually were going to try and go with M&Ms, and they going to try and put. They actually were going to try and put have it the Mars company. They were going to try and get M&Ms to let M&Ms be in the movie. However, for one reason or another, the Mars I think corporation would not let M&Ms be in the movie. So they went to Hershey's, who I believe was the owner of make the Reese's Pieces, and they let the Reese's Pieces be in the movie, and then as a result of that, the Reese's Pieces were the sales actually were boosted a lot after this movie. I mean, Reese's Pieces became very popular after E.T. came out. I think a lot more popular than M&Ms. Y'all, I have to take a quick break. I will be right back very soon. And we are back. Thank you all for waiting through that. I had a bit of an interruption there. So now this is actually now this scene right here. This is so it's a dinner scene where it's finally where we meet the family And we get to meet Drew Barrymore. We meet Dee Wallace as the mom. We meet Michael, the character, and you can kind of see the family dynamic there. You can see that Elliot's really. You kind of see that. You kind of heard from what I was talking about. Spielberg made this movie kind of in response to that his upbringing and kind of in response to like his lonely childhood and the divorce of his parents. And we even mentioned here that Elliot's dad, I do believe, and their parents were divorced. And you could see the toll that it had, on his mom, and how difficult it was. I mean, from being in. I mean, not to be too personal, at least about this, but I do remember I was about Elliot's age going through a divorce, so I kind of understood and I could understand, how I don't think I was as lonely off as Elliot was, but I could definitely I definitely appreciate now looking back on it how difficult it was for the mom. So, interesting scene here. Elliot is finally coming face to face with E.T. I don't really know if this was intentional or not, but Elliot is trying to call for his family, his mom, Michael, but he's doing it. He's lost his voice or he's intentionally going really quiet about it. He's not trying to tell them about he's not trying to alert them that much at all. So. Yeah. And again, going back to the lighting of E.T., you don't really see him that clearly now. You can see the outline, which we kind of knew about the outline of E.T., and then, we can also see his hands here, which we've seen his hands a little bit in the movie as well. And it's kind of an interesting scene. We see that he got the that E.T. got the Reese's Pieces from Elliot, and that he put them back, and there's some kind of, and that's the start of the connection between them. So, and then we see that Elliot's he's bringing them into the house, and Elliot's using the Reese's Pieces to get him back to his room. So, I will admit though, I like the choices of Reese's Pieces instead of M&M's. I feel like M&M's would be a little bit too mainstream. I know Reese's is kind of, this is completely off topic from the movie perspective, but Reese's Pieces, I mean, I don't know. I think it's got a bit of a charm to it, just instead of M&M's, because everybody knows what M&M's are. So. Now E.T. is going into Elliot's room. Now you see the hands of E.T. A lot in this movie, featured really prominently. So going over the little bit of the design of E.T. and kind of the overall kind of aesthetic of him. The arms are actually kind of their own little the arms are separate from the body of E.T. The body of E.T. Oh, and he's making a lot of noise, which is ugh. But so E.T. is a mixture of little people in costumes, in the E.T. costumes, and that moving around with I think the animatronic. With an animatronic head, with eyes and whatnot that would be able to move, and then the arms of E.T. is actually done by a mime, I believe by the name of Caprice Roth. Caprice Roth, who is a professional mime. She actually apparently had these hands that you can see with E.T. had these long kind of fingers, and she had these hands that apparently Steven Spielberg and the cast they fell in love with. So. That's kind of how the E.T.'s how E.T. was put together, and the person inside of E.T. it kind of varied from scene to scene. They they filled in. There was multiple kind of dwarfs and little people that they would put inside E.T. I think professional dwarfs who had worked on movies in a professional sense before. Probably the most interesting one, that there was a boy, a 12-year-old boy who was actually a 12-year-old boy named Matthew Demerit, who was born without legs, and you actually see like behind the scenes footage, like he literally is an upper torso with no legs. I mean, it's like he got maybe sliced in the middle there. But one of the things that Matthew did, and I mention it when the scene comes up, but Matthew was in the scene in the kitchen where E.T. kind of like is falling on his face and whatnot. And the thing that Matthew did with E.T. that was kind of funny was that Matthew actually would like walk with his hands, and that's kind of how that's how like E.T. definitely get like the shuffle and whatnot. So, and now we finally have met E.T. And we now are back to the government agents meeting them again. You only see you can see the silhouettes, the backs of their heads. I mean, for the Keyes character, I mean, you get to know him basically by his legs, and you see him at the waist. You see his keys like at his pockets and whatnot. Now, an interesting discovery here. He will discover the Reese's Pieces. Again, very, very odd. You would not see Reese's Pieces out and about like that. So. And now we are the classic faking sick to stay home from school. As you can see, Elliot here, he's like warming himself up artificially. I don't know exactly what that is. It's like some kind of like thing that he's laying on, and he's like lighting the temperature up from the lamp. Basically like faking himself a fever, so. And also, we see that Michael here is trying to learn how to drive. So, I think you also see that Elliot's Michael learning how to drive. That'll become a bit of a plot point later in the movie. And then also Michael learning how to drive. That's a rough backing up. I also love the old 80s cars that he's driving. You also see that Elliot's like. You said that Elliot was very like concerned when his mom went into the closet, and he was like, "Oh no, will she discover him?" and all this. Oh no, and you saw him kind of, and then you also saw his mom just kiss him, saying no TV, and. We obviously know that Elliot's skipping school he's skipping school, so. Dee Wallace is, I think, the consummate mom in this. I mean, I think Dee Wallace has also played a mom in I think several other different movies, and the way that she talks to her kids, the way that she has the way that she's, kind of the way that she's like, going about, getting her kids to school and whatnot. It's very much mom-like. I remember like she had Gertie, played by Drew Barrymore, like on the ground, who was like, saying, "Hey mom, look at what I got." And I think her mom was like, "Yep, I see it, Gertie. We gotta go." That kind of, I feel like the classic mom kind of vibe, at least from what I'm getting. So now we're starting to kind of establish the friendship of Elliot and E.T. Elliot's kind of like showing him around his house and, showing him like his different toys. And one of the things that you see from, in this is Elliot is very much a kid, like acts like a kid in this scene, in these scenes. One of the things that Steven Spielberg was very good about on when they were making this film is, he and that, the actors and, who are, grown up now, I think Henry Thomas, Drew Barrymore, Robert MacNaughton, who were kids when they made this movie, they were like, Steven was really good about, just letting us be kids, and he was, and they were very much not, he wasn't, over controlling. I mean, he let them, come up with dialogue. He let them, kind of just do their own thing. So, and it gives really, and it gives really, I think, genuine performances. Because, you see Elliot just being really kid-like and how he's, like, introducing his room. Like, he's showing him all his toys and his fish, and, like, he's showing him, like, what a Pez dispenser is. It just seems, it's really cute, And he's showing him, like, what putting a coin into a piggy bank, so. Yeah, I think he gives E.T. the car, and then he starts to eat the car. And Elliot, I think, gets the idea that he's hungry. So a little behind the... So Elliot, played by Henry Thomas, I believe that the casting of Henry Thomas was... done kind of late, almost just before they started filming. I think Spielberg even stated that he didn't have an Elliot until about 3 to 4 weeks before the start of shooting. And one of the things, and he apparently had interviewed tons and tons of kids to be Elliot, and when Henry Thomas came in, the initial story was that Henry Thomas didn't give the greatest formal audition for the role. I mean, it wasn't. According to Henry Thomas, it wasn't that good of an introduction. No, this is such a cute scene. E.T.'s just trembling behind the stuffed animals. But what was it? So Henry Thomas, there actually is like footage of like his audition, and he did kind of an improv scene with Spielberg, and it basically was you have like a best friend who's an alien, and you have like an official from the government that's coming in to be like, hey, you're gonna need to like give him up to the government, and you're gonna need to you need to give him up. And you saw that Henry Thomas, you saw a lot of what will become Elliot, his like, you can't take him away, he's mine, and a lot of the stuff that would have been used in the movie. And I think it was from that, it was really what kind of sold Spielberg on the idea of Henry Thomas being cast as Elliot. So now, very interesting. Henry Thomas. There's a little-known sequel of E.T., and it's not really... there's no official sequel, except for this... There's like this 4-minute little short film starring Henry Thomas, who reprises his role as Elliot in the present time here. And it basically is like Henry Thomas... Elliot, who's played by Henry Thomas as an adult, is now grown up, and he... has a family now, and apparently E.T. comes to visit, and Elliot remembers E.T., and E.T. remembers Elliot, and then basically, like, his kid, he kind of messes around with his kids, and, like, they fly around with his kids on the bike and whatnot, so. It's on YouTube if anybody's interested, just E.T. sequel. It's actually, I think, it's like a holiday commercial, technically, so. Now this is this is now this scene is in which Gertie, played by Drew Barrymore, and then Mike, the older brother, they meet E.T. and the funny thing, so the interesting thing about the production of E.T. is that it actually was filmed in mostly chronological order of how the movie happens. Of course, a lot of people, that almost never happens actually in filmmaking and film production. Normally, what happens is the film it's normally filmed like in chunks and in pieces, and it's filmed in such a way that they can put it together kind of at the end. But the thing that Spielberg said in this movie was that working with kids is that it's really hard emotionally for the kids to work in the to work kind of out of order like this. I mean, it gave the kids the opportunity to like grow with E.T. and to like get in grow in an emotional bond, an emotional attachment with him. I mean, for instance here, like the scene just now in which Michael, the older brother, he turns around and sees E.T. for the first time, and I believe even Drew Barrymore, Gertie, this is the first. That was the first time they had ever seen E.T. and Elliot. I mean, I believe when he saw E.T. for the first time, I mean that was also in the film as well. So the scene where Michael turns around and his like reaction of seeing E.T. for the first time, that is the reaction of seeing him for the first time in real time. So. We also have just another cute scene of kids being kids here. So now, an interesting thing with Drew Barrymore is that she was actually, Drew Barrymore, very famous actress, from a very famous acting family, the Barrymores, and according to the story, I mean, she didn't really audition for the role of Gertie. Spielberg had brought in, hundreds of, little, I think, girls to come in and, audition for the role of Gertie. And according to Spielberg, like when Drew Barrymore walked into the room, he knew immediately that, that's my Gertie, and, that's the person that's going to play Gertie. And one of the interesting things about it, it's kind of a fun little kid story about Gertie is that she actually, according to like Spielberg, she would come in and she would like be telling like all these like outrageous stories, is that and that she was like a member of like a punk rock band, like, and that she was the drummer of it, and then she had like all these like just totally outrageous stories to tell Spielberg. And apparently it was like her, big imagination that kind of got her the part of Gertie. So, and also one of the things that was stated, which I partially agree with, is the idea that one of the things that Spielberg stated is that with kid actors, you almost know when they walk into the room, if they are your character or not, because. It was kind of something, in terms of kids and that kind of thing. So, and then with Robert MacNaughton, who plays Mike the brother, it was Robert MacNaughton was actually in a play, I believe in New York. He was in a play in New York, and he went out to Los Angeles to audition for some kind of a role in a Spielberg movie, for another role in a movie, which he didn't get, and then he went over and auditioned for a role in a movie, and then after he didn't get the part in that next movie, I believe his part people were telling him, hey, this role in a Spielberg movie is opened up as well, and Spielberg's office is casting, so and also sorry, I'm just kind of going between watching the movie and it, one of the things that was funny. Drew Barrymore just stated that she doesn't like his feet, which apparently was an on-set ad lib. So, but according to an article that I read online, apparently Robert MacNaughton was casted because of his extensive D&D knowledge, and one of the things that you saw was, and that was part of the reason. I'm pretty sure, he even said it himself. He didn't audition exactly for the role. He kind of got interviewed for it, and I think Spielberg really liked it, and he knew that Spielberg was, and Spielberg kind of knew McNaughton was big into D&D, so I think that really helped him get the part. So, and all three of them have a great chemistry together. They can really kind of tell the sibling relationship is, it's the actors and Drew Barrymore, like, they all have like great chemistry together, and you can really tell that they're genuine in their like emotions, and they're genuine in their interactions with each other. So I think it was also kind of the idea. I think also the fact that them being on set and being kids together making this movie, it was I think that also helped him out in the situation as well. So, and that's ultimately like the driving force behind the movie is the great performances by the kids. They're not, they're maybe not by professional standards. They're not maybe like the greatest of actors, but like the roles, like the performances that they give in this movie. And it kind of builds upon each other, and they kind of build off of each other. Drew Barrymore gives great performances, maybe because of how good, Henry Thomas and how good Robert MacNaughton give. And those three actors, actors, and, Drew Barrymore's an actress. I mean, they really, drive them. They really are the emotional center of the movie. So, and then also, E.T. as well. Really interesting scene. E.T. brings the plant back to life. In the scene here, we've gotten a little bit of a sense of E.T.'s like powers per se. They were asking him, "Where are you from?" and they were showing him like a map of the solar system, and E.T. like took like these clay balls and he like levitated them, and kind of caused them to spin around and all that good stuff. And then he also, I believe also, and then just now he looked at the plant and he caused the plant to regenerate and gave life to the plant. So, and so yeah. One of the interesting things is that Elliot, E.T.'s powers is Oh, it's really funny. Oh man, I believe Michael's in high school, and the old trappings of high school living on the bus. I never rode a bus in high school, but I just thought it was a funny scene. Not gonna lie, I didn't really know where I was going with that. What I was talking about. So. Oh yeah, no, I forget. I'm a little all over the place right now. E.T., his powers were actually determined by kids. I remember one of the stories, it was Melinda, I think it was Melinda Matheson, who was one of the primary writers of E.T. She actually was, I believe she was asking like kids, like, hey, Melissa Matheson, not Melinda. But she was asking kids, like, if you had like a creature, or if there was like a creature that came by and there was like a magical creature, what power would you want them to have? And, some had the powers of like, levitation or super strength and all that kind of stuff. You had a lot of kids that would say they want the power of healing and the power of like, regeneration and that kind of thing. And so, And that was ultimately what happened in the movie. Now we haven't really gotten to that, scene. It was the scene where E.T., his finger would light up and he would, touch and, he would heal you. So, but that was mostly determined, by, asking kids. So, just kind of another instance of how like kids, definitely influenced the making of E.T. Now this scene here, I believe this was actually the first few scenes actually shot. And I said earlier that the film was shot in general chronological continuity, which basically means, they would film the beginning scenes first and then the end scenes last. And I believe, in a technical sense, this the scene with in the school here, where and Elliot's in school, I believe this scene was actually shot at the first scene overall, and for one, it's a really important scene because it introduces the psychological bond between E.T. and Elliot, and how they're basically essentially bonded together. There's some kind of like telepathic link that bonds them, because it's that scene where E.T. starts drinking E.T. starts drinking beer, and Elliot starts to burp, and he starts to feel the adverse effects of it. So, and then also E.T. is walking around and he falls on himself, and Elliot can feel it on his nose, and E.T.'s getting drunk, and Elliot's starting to get drunk as well. So, I don't know if they do explain it or not, but I never really understood the bond between E.T. and Elliot, because, as we see in the movie, as E.T.'s health starts to decline, Elliot starts to decline as well. And there was that scene in which Elliot fell on the floor. And you can see he's, very drunk. I also love like the E.T.'s. He's drinking Coors from the beer. He's drinking Coors from the cans, and they're like those old style of, Coors cans. So, again, it's a bit of that old nostalgia, 80s, like kind of that old nostalgia from the 80s. So, I also love the scenes in the on the TV here. So they're seeing E.T. playing. They're seeing E.T. like turning on a TV and kind of playing some like different scenes and like of movies and whatnot. One of the things I noticed about that is that it was one of them was a Tom and Jerry cartoon, and that it was scenes that were meant for children, because again, this movie's filmed from a child's perspective, from E.T.'s a child's perspective, and also E.T.'s perspective as well. And also going to that, you don't see any of the adults like upper bodies. You also don't see Elliot's teacher as well. You don't see his face, or you don't see his features. So, I believe E.T. is now hungover after drinking all that beer, and he is also reading magazines. It's really funny because through this, you're learning how E.T. is basically trying to figure out a way to get home. But it's done through silence because, E.T. at this point has not been able to learn how to speak yet. And he's looking around and he's starting to see all these like different tools and whatnot that will help him actually communicate to get home. And, you're also seeing, his connection between like the phone and, E.T. phone home, which we'll see, in a second here. And also, there's a Buck Rogers comic that shows basically shows like a communication device that will be able to get them home. So, and somehow that says that somehow that speaks to Elliot. That states that states that Elliot somehow that speaks to Elliot. That says you need to save all these frogs and whatnot. And I believe what the class was doing, they were going to do like an autopsy of the frog. And I don't get the connection between that. I'm pretty sure somebody else would, but... So an interesting thing about the school scene here, there's actually a couple interesting things. There was a scene coming up here in which Elliot has to stand up on a guy to get tall enough to kiss this girl, and they kiss each other. Oh, I love this scene. There's the girl is standing there just kind of in shock, and there's like frogs all around her feet. So, and one of the things that they show is that they show Elliot kind of whirling a girl around, and then there's a guy that crawls underneath him, and he steps on the guy to get tall enough, and then he kisses the girl. And apparently Henry Thomas was very much against this idea, and he was apparently, according to the story, he almost gave up acting because of that. He was really reluctant to kiss that girl. Of course, you also got to remember it is about it was like an 8 to 10-year-old boy. Like, kissing a girl is very very awkward. If I was in that situation, I would probably react the same way. Now, another thing that's interesting is, and I don't know exactly when this scene would take place, actually. I believe it actually takes place after this scene, but it's the deleted scene that I was talking about. But I think there's a telephone call coming up here in a second. But there's a scene in which Elliot, after his whole ordeal in the their whole ordeal in the classroom where he lets all the frogs out, there's a scene with Elliot in the principal's office. And the interesting thing about that meeting in the principal's office is that the principal himself is actually played by Harrison Ford, as I've said earlier, plays Han Solo in Indiana Jones. So, they're just kicking stuff around, and I think Dee Wallace gets the call for Elliot being in the principal's office. So, but and the interesting thing about like Harrison Ford in the role of the principal is that you don't really see his face. He's all silhouetted, he's all shadowed, and it's kind of that like mysterious principal figure. And another thing that's really interesting about that scene is that it also kind of goes into this the idea of their like telepathic link, being more closely connected, because E.T. in that scene, what he does at home, E.T. rolls up the material up the stairs. Like he as we've seen in the movie here, he's gathered all this material together to create this like contraption to oh my gosh. Drew Barrymore as Gertie is just so adorable. So, but and the scene will happen. It happens chronologically just after this scene, but E.T. uses his telepathic link to send this like material of like these materials of that he's going to make this contraption up the stairs. And when doing this in the deleted scene, he actually levitates Elliot in the principal's office. Now, it's kind of constructed really funny because Harrison Ford in this situation is actually looking out the window, and he is, and he doesn't see Elliot's levitation act, and in doing that, and then right at the end, right as he turns around, Elliot, drops onto the ground, and Harrison Ford is, he obviously, completely oblivious to the fact that he was elevating. And Elliot is in the original scene. Elliot was very, like spooked from it. So. E.T. now, we learn that E.T. is finally learning how to talk. And what it's the famous he's trying to phone home. So I'm trying to learn what to talk about this scene right here. Home. E.T. phone home. And then I think Elliot finally realizes what's actually going on here. E.T.'s trying to, contact his home, and he wants to go home. Basically, the phone he's trying to call home, so. Now we get the final crux of the situation. He's trying to go home, so. And I don't really understand. I never really understood and I said it before, the telepathic link between Elliot and E.T. I never really understood that, or how it, came to be. I think it just kind of happens. But of course, in this movie, I feel like also from this movie, it's from the perspective of kids, and a lot of times with kids, you don't really tend to question things. Things just kind of happen. So I think in that situation, it works. So. You also see now that the government officials are starting to snoop around, and they start to hear some interesting chatter from from Elliot's house, from Elliot and Michael. And also now, one of the things that we're starting to realize is, and Michael, the older brother, says, is that, Elliot, he doesn't look too good, and it gets in. We start to, as the movie goes on, not in these early scenes, but we realize that E.T., he's starting to basically die. He's dying, and I think it's because and again, we never really told outright, but I think it's just because being away from his home and being away, he's just not built to survive on Earth like he is, like we are. So not a whole lot to really talk about in a lot of these scenes. They're just kind of like, they're really kind of the more heartfelt scenes, just kind of the actors. A lot of talking scenes here, like you had Michael and Elliot talking. Now you have Dee Wallace and Drew Barrymore kind of talking. Drew Wallace is telling Dee Wallace is telling Drew Barrymore like a bedtime story, and then E.T. is in the closet with Elliot. They're starting to make their little contraption there. One of the things that I never really understood was Elliot had the saw blade. No, I understand. Part of the contraption that they're trying to make, he had to get like a saw blade. And we see it here. He's trying to pick the saw blade up. and he cuts himself on it. And now we see E.T. uses his healing power. He uses his magical finger to touch Elliot's finger, and it heals him up. Which, again, as I said earlier, I mean, that superpower actually came from kids wanting to, kids wanting that, like, superpower, like, within, like, their own, like, special characters, so. Really heartfelt scenes here. I mean, not only, from the kind of the visuals, you have the little scene, Elliot putting his arm around E.T., but also just kind of the music. I mean, the music of this movie is among the best. I'd say, the top 3 or 5 scores in movie history. I mean, I think this score is, almost as good as any score that's ever been put together, so. And, it knows exactly when to be heartfelt, and it also knows, when to be dramatic. And again, I mean, the score is by John Williams, who is very famous. He's scored Star Wars. He wrote the original Harry Potter score. He has also written the theme to Jaws, and then he also wrote this theme and then Jurassic Park. So, and I would say this is probably, this and Star Wars and Jaws are probably John Williams is probably his best work and his best, his best, scores. Because, I mean, the theme of E.T., that I think everybody, if nobody knows the theme to E.T., I mean, I'd have no idea how you've probably been living under a rock your entire life. But, I mean, the idea, I think, of E.T. is from a kid's perspective, it's, joy and wonderment. And that's the thing that's the emotion that is elicited whenever John Williams, that theme comes up, is, the hair stands on the neck of your back. I mean, I don't care. One of the things that was really interesting about some of the history of this movie is that Steven Spielberg actually had the opportunity to take it to the White House, and they screened it for the White House. And this was back when Reagan was the president. And one of the things that Spielberg was very much one of the things that Spielberg was very much impressed by was Reagan's childlike demeanor when he was watching this movie, because what Spielberg even said himself, you saw that Reagan was kind of beaming, kind of shining light like a little boy. So I think that the idea, at least behind all that, and at least the score was if the leader of the free world is driven to boyish emotions and driven to be like a kid, when the movie comes out, during a movie like this, then who knows how the reactions from other people would be. So. Oh my goodness. I think that was E.T. just ogling, Elliot and them's mom, so. And then also we seen that Gertie is waiting with a bike in an actual ghost costume, and she's just kicking around. There's an Easter egg coming up here. And this is the Halloween sequence. Elliot, I think Elliot's dressed up as a vampire, and then Michael's dressed up as a hobo. I mean, you're seeing the zombie doctors, and they're passing off Drew Barrymore. I mean, Gertie as a ghost, with the sheet thrown over her head. So and there's a little right here. So there's a Yoda person in a Yoda costume, and that was kind of a and that elicits like a definite elicits a definite emotion out of E.T. And one of the things that was actually it was like an homage to George Lucas, because George Lucas was the creator of Star Wars, and Steven Spielberg and George Lucas are like really good friends. In fact, actually, George Lucas was the writer and the overall creator of Indiana Jones, while Steven Spielberg wrote it. So directed, I meant. So they've collaborated a few times together. And so again, there was a Yoda costume in the movie, and that was again like a nod to Star Wars. And then later in Episode 1, The Phantom Menace, George Lucas actually returned the favor and put a whole bunch of ETs in the movie, which is kind of like, it's a little off camera, but they're still there. So now this scene right here, this is the famous bike flying sequence. E.T. in the basket of the bicycle, Elliot's in the air pedaling, and the bike is going, and they're just flying all over the place. And then the amazing John Williams score. You have the famous moon shot of Elliot riding across the moon. Apparently that was a real moon. I mean, I've never seen a moon that big before. And the moon was extremely. It was really big in the shot there, but apparently they shot it over a few days there, and then Dennis Muren, who was one of the lead special effects artists for the film, he said that we wanted to do this as realistic as possible. So, they found that little location there where the shot happened, and I think they photographed it just over a couple of days. So, and then obviously like the little scene of Elliot was obviously like digitally composited in, not digitally because pretty sure they had to use different photography techniques. So now they're in the woods setting up E.T.'s little contraption to try and call home, which apparently they use some umbrella. There's an umbrella. There's a thing on a spindle, with a coat hanger, and how this thing actually is able to be actually put to use to actually communicate. I have no idea. The interesting thing is that this contraption was actually specifically designed by a person for this movie. Let me look real quick here. And again, I don't really know. It's a really small part in the sequence. Gosh dang it! So there's looking up on Wikipedia. There was somebody that that was able to that specifically made that contraption for E.T. to find his fam to call home. And apparently he was some kind of engineer or something like that. Again, I don't know what it's a movie prop. I know people get really into movie props, but at least for my money, it's nothing really all that impressive. So. And again, we're looking. I believe we're still waiting for I think they're still waiting for the contraption to actually start working. Apparently, what they did is they tied some kind of rope to a tree, and then I believe that kind of activated the device in some kind of way, and then the umbrella, like because they like set like some kind of like signal sender to it, like on an umbrella. Again, I'd really like to see the ins and outs of why this machine works, but again, that's a bit nitpicky there. So, also something that we noticed that when the family was gone away is that again, one of the things that the mother of the movie said is that you have to be you guys have to be back by sundown, or I think 1 hour after sundown, and the family has not, and then the kids are not back by that time, and now the government agents are in the house kind of snooping around and seeing what's going on. Again, the dramatic music by John Williams there. You also see, just kind of subtly, the declining health of both Elliot and Et here. One of the things that they even showed right before the scene when Et was, I think, kind of creating the contraption was the flower that Et had, the little flower that Et had, like, kind of brought back to life. It was starting to kind of die again. And I think, Spielberg kind of put that in as a little bit of like an allegory or a bit of a metaphor of, E.T., living and dying, so. And then you also see, Elliot kind of, Elliot was trying to, talk to E.T., and one of the things that, Elliot's realizing with this is that, with calling E.T., I mean, he's, E.T. calling, his alien family, Elliot's going to lose E.T., and, at this point in the movie, it ultimately seems that, E.T. is the only friend that Elliot really has, so. Again, going back to the themes of, loneliness in the movie, so. And now we have cut to the morning. It appears that Elliot has fallen asleep in the forest, and E.T. is nowhere to be found. I really like the cinematography of this scene. It's really it's kind of, it's like a fog. It's like you're in a daze. It's like a fog. There's like a fog kind of enveloping the forest, and it's like Elliot's waking up in like a dream of some kind of sort. And he also still has his face paint on from the night before. And I also do believe it was a police officer that they've. The police officer asking questions to the mom about how Elliot, what Elliot was wearing, and what he'd do to disappear. So, and again, you can see it's really hard on the mom. Again, I really feel for the mom in this movie because, I mean, I remember, when my mom was going through a divorce, it was, really tough on her. So that's something I really kind of empathize with in the movie. I can really relate to, the mom having a real tough time with it. So. I will admit though, like, I mean, not a criticism of the movie, but it's a little bit of a bit of a jump So now we're seeing Mike going out to find E.T., and now we also see that there's people that are following him, and Mike notices that. Although I will admit, like, Robert MacNaughton, a bit of a unrelated topic, Robert MacNaughton looks he looks old for kind of a 16-year-old, although, you know, people are, you know, age, you know, differently in movies, so it's not that different, so. But one of the things that that kind of puzzles me, again, like, questions about this movie is, like, E.T.'s just relative, like, it's a very quick, like, descent into, like, being very, into, you know, not being sick, essentially. Because, I mean, and we see it a little bit through the movie, and, you know, there's never really, at least in my eyes, there's never really a good explanation for it. You know, he, you know, starts to get real sick. He's, you know, in this scene right here, you know, we're seeing that Michael's going around trying to find him. And, you know, when we meet him, you know, he's not in the best of shape. He looks really, you know, sick and, you know, looks like he's about to die. And, you know, then we also see from the telepathic link that has been created between them, they're not, again, it's not, you know, Elliot's also, you know, experiencing the same, you know, emotions and feelings, so. And I do remember there was somebody, the scene right here, they were actually kind of referring to, like, you know, E.T. He kind of had like a white, like, kind of powdery substance, like, all over him, and one of them was referring to E.T. as like looking like a glazed, like, Dunkin' Donut, like, with, like, this powdered sugar over him. And now government officials are now starting to ascend on the house. And now the kids are starting to want to tell you know, the mom that, you know, there's something that is going on in the house. So, and now she meets E.T. So, this little theme right here, in the background music of it, also adds kind of gravity to the situation. I mean, again, the music of this movie is, I would put this score up against, you know, any score in, you know, in movie history, so. And I don't know if the mom is scared of the alien now, or I don't know exactly what's happening here. But then Michael opens the door and sees the government officials coming up, and they're starting to descend on the house, which, again, I don't really understand why they have they have to wear the space outfits. It looks like they're, you know, walking in space, the outfits they're wearing, so. And then, you know, the music here just kind of adds to the drama of the situation, so. Although I could understand, like, them wearing, like, these wearing, like, they're like these outfits, just mainly because they're like, you know, like, they don't know what kind of germs, like, the alien would have, so they have to, like, quarantine, or like they like wear, like, these, like, specialized, like, masks and, or like, outfits to not, like, get infected by whatever it's infected by, so. And also, I mean, again, from this movie being told from a kid's point of view, when we finally are starting to see, like, more adults, kind of, like, one of the things that Spielberg was even saying is, like, the adults are starting to, like, you know, we're kind of, like, take over the kids' world. And one of the things that, you know, Spielberg had said earlier in the film is that, you know, we had been kind of looking at the film through a kid's lens, and now we're seeing the the adults starting to come in, take over, and they come in like there are these like big bad, like they're really it's like a big deal, and they're really silhouetted. It's very they're these mysterious figures. It's again something that's just again kind of scary for all those involved. I mean, they come in like raiding the house. I mean, it's for somebody that would be in the scene, it's a bit frightening. So. Now that the Keys character, they actually, so what they're showing here is that the house has been basically put on lockdown, put on quarantine essentially. Again, a bit of a charged term in our time now, but according to I believe the original plan in the movie was they were actually going to do this all in a hospital. They were trying to recruit a hospital for the to use these last couple scenes to use like the hospital scenes in, but they couldn't really find a hospital suitable enough for but what they decided to do was, and that they decided would be more realistic, is that the government would come in and essentially and they, gosh, what was I trying to say? No, what they were trying to do is like what they decided is that the government, it'd be more pertinent that the government would come in and essentially lock down the house, and that in a sense would be the more realistic option that they would do there. So instead of going to like some like hospital, they would go to the house, put the house on lockdown, lock down the neighborhood, and do all that kind of stuff. So, and now, and the scene just happened here just a few minutes ago. But Peter Coyote, who has been playing the Keys character, the guy that had the keys by his waist belt there. But there's a scene there where he comes up to the camera and his face is revealed, and Spielberg, and even watching it just now. And I've never watched the film through this lens, but Spielberg states that is the first scene or first instance of an adult being showcased in like his face being showcased, and then soon after that we see like all these other adults. I mean, you can see like they're a lot of them are all masked up and like they're behind like these protective masks and whatnot, but you're starting to see more and more of the adults, and the adults have taken over the house. And again, it's going back to that whole idea that the characters like lives are starting to be like taken over by the adults now. Now, Peter Coyote, the Keys character, he's talking to Elliot about the little contraption that they've created, and he's asking him what it does and all that kind of stuff. Now, Peter Coyote's involvement in this story, it's a little bit, it's not exactly super like it's. Because it's an interesting story for an actor that we don't see a whole lot of his face. I mean, there's about 30, from what I'm seeing on the Blu-ray here, there's about 30 minutes left in this movie, and this is literally the first instance that we see Peter Coyote's face. And kind of the backstory behind Peter Coyote getting the role is Peter Coyote had actually auditioned for the role of Indiana Jones, and when he went in to do the audition for Indiana Jones, he kind of had he was dressed up as Indiana Jones, like he had the jacket, with the collar popped up, he had the fedora on. But then when he walked into the meeting, Peter Coyote apparently tripped over a light stand, and everybody knows Indiana Jones. He's supposed to come off as this smooth, suave, action hero, and Peter Coyote coming in tripping over his own feet essentially wasn't a very good first impression. And even Spielberg, seconded that as well. So, but one of the things that but apparently according to that meeting was Peter Coyote and Steven Spielberg kind of developed like a good bond with each other, and they started talking, and according to Peter Coyote, he left a good impression on Steven Spielberg. So when he came back to cast this Keyes character, he went back to Peter Coyote and he was, "Hey, do you want to be in the movie here?" So. And this is something that I actually realized from watching the movie just now, actually. There's the famous scene at the end of the movie in which, E.T. kind of holds his finger up and he says, "I'll be right here." And Elliot, is trying to reach over to E.T. and, E.T.'s, starting to die now. His heart rate's starting to slow, and Elliot's like, "E.T., stay with me. I'll be right here." And it looks like E.T.'s starting to die now, and Elliot's kind of going back to normal. So, now this scene was this is the scene where E.T.'s dying now, and it's very, even on set, it was very emotional for the actors and actresses, because, especially for Drew Barrymore, that was a very poignant little behind the scenes clip with them, but with Drew Barrymore and Steven Spielberg crying during the making of this scene. But one of the interesting things about Drew Barrymore with her relationship with E.T. is that she thought that the character of E.T. was a real character. Again, she was like a 6-year-old, 7-year-old kid back in the day, and she even stated that she knew that it was made by like mechanical, animatronics, and it was a person in a suit. But in her own recollections, it was as real as all can be. So, and when they're filming the scenes here, a lot of these, like the characters' reactions and their emotions are real emotions, and that also went, and you see the scene here in which the flowers are starting to die out, and Michael's like starting to cry out. Going back to the whole idea that the film was filmed in like chronological continuity. They had grown attached to E.T. at this point, and so when they started to see that he was dying, they were thinking that they're losing a good friend. So but it was, again, it's a bit of a poignant scene there, poignant scene here. So they're trying to resuscitate him. He's trying to do CPR. Again, and they're trying to they've even said that his internal organ structure is different than any other humans, I believe. And I think one of the things that I learned in the kind of the physiology of E.T. and the anatomy itself is that he's actually E.T. and his species are actually technically built like vegetables, essentially. Apparently, the inside of E.T. is built more like a vegetable. It's got a vegetative plant kind of structure inside of it. So, and that's one of the things that they're trying to revive him here. But the thing is that they're trying to revive him with human with human techniques and whatnot, and it's just not working. So, and then you got Drew Barrymore crying on camera here. I mean, that was real tears. I mean, these are about as real as emotions get when you come to film. And again, there's and again, a tearjerker on film, tearjerker while watching the movie, but when you're going in I'm pretty sure, for all those that were involved, like in the making of the movie, I'm pretty sure it was even more heartfelt and more tear-jerking. So I see that. Yeah, you just saw Michael's friends there, and one of them just said, "Shut up, Greg," which was kind of a callback to the beginning of the film, so. So now I do believe that E.T. is finally, I think at least in this movie, he's died, and I think the doctors are realizing there's nothing more they can do, so they're turning off all the lights. I never really thought to cry. I never really been brought to tears while watching E.T. Although I will admit, this is for a kid at least, this is a very poignant scene, very sad scene, at least for, told through the eyes of, kids, so. So now we're at the aftermath. E.T. has died. Everybody's kind of looks like they're in a state of shock. And everybody's removing their masks. I don't, that's another, why are you removing your masks, after he dies? But again, that's just kind of, that's me being nitpicky of the whole movie, so. So, yeah. Now they're starting to bring out the little thing, the I think the box in which they'll keep E.T. in. And these scenes here, not a whole lot to really say, honestly. It's just kind of bit sad. Of course, the real action is going to start here in just a few minutes, where they start bicycling at the bicycle chase, which is my favorite part of the movie. My favorite part of E.T. is the ending, actually, the ending bike chase, and then the final goodbye between Elliot and E.T. So. Actually, no. This brings up actually an interesting behind the scenes story, because coming up here in just a second, we're going to see that Elliot is kind of looking down at E.T.'s kind of coffin, as what we would say what it is. And he kind of, actually, I'm looking at it now, I'm brought to talk about something else, actually. I've just noticed how gentle the Peter Coyote character is. And it's kind of weird. I just did a 180 degree on what I was talking about. That's the one thing, at least, that about this movie that's a kind of in a bit of a heartwarming sense, is that there's not really, at least in my eyes, there's not really a true villain. You could possibly see the government agents as the villains of the movie, the big bad guys coming in and destroying everything, but when you finally meet the main government agent, the Keyes character, Peter Coyote's character, he's actually filled with a lot of warmth and really gentle with them, and he shows a lot of empathy towards Elliot and the family, and it's not like any other government agent, oh, the aliens died, but it's I just noticed again how again, that was just the one thing that just kind of popped into my mind there, So that, again, really heartwarming, at least in the film, so. But, so going back to what I was saying earlier, behind the scenes, so one of the things that would happen a lot in this movie is Steven Spielberg would actually voice the lines of E.T. before they would actually dub the voice in itself. And E.T. now, E.T. actually did have its own voice actor that would dub the lines later, and we'll get into that a little bit, but a lot of these scenes here would be behind the scenes. It would be Steven Spielberg kind of talking to Henry Thomas, kind of coaching him, like, what to do. Like, it's like, you need to do this, you need to do, like, you need to do, show me this, show me that, show me this. And this scene in particular, it kind of shows it, and this is also right at the moment in which E.T. we're starting to see the plant come back to life, and Elliot realizes that. He goes back to the coffin, and then he sees that E.T. is being brought back to life. And you also see that his heart's flashing now. And then this scene right here, like, you see camera shot of Elliot, like, Steven Spielberg is in the background, like, talking. They're talking to, like, Henry Thomas. And it's kind of funny because when the movie officially came out and they were doing the sneak preview of E.T., Henry Thomas was, I think, sitting next to Steven Spielberg at the movies, and one of the things that Steven Spielberg had asked Henry Thomas is, well, what did you think of the movie? He's like, well, it was good, but you need to cut your voice out of it, because he still thinks about because he still thought about Steven Spielberg's, like, voice. So I also love how Elliot's just great at faking his, like, emotions here. So no, he's so good at faking it. Elliot's such a good faker in this movie. That just makes me laugh. But oh man, oh yeah, I was going to talk about the voice of E.T. actually. Now the voice of E.T. was actually provided by an actress. Actually, let me get the actress's name here. 1 second. Oh yeah, Pat Welsh. So she was an old actress who apparently had to supply the raspy voice for E.T. And along with that, and also some kind of recording artistry by Ben Burt, they were able to create, like, this raspy kind of voice of E.T. And, like, the recording, what they would say, like, the different recording was they were, like, recordings of, like, different animals, of, like, apparently there was a USC professor that was burping that he would mix in there. I mean, and he also apparently included different, like, Steven Spielberg had a idea of had help in getting E.T.'s voice brought to life. And again, Ben Burt, who's really famous, for in the field of sound recording. I mean, Ben Burt's the guy that created basically all the sounds for for Star Wars. He created the lightsaber effect. He created the blaster effect. All the ship sounds in Star Wars. And not only was he famous for that, but he was also, again, very famous for E.T.'s voice as well. So now we are starting the chase scene, and the boys here are looks like Michael's friends, one of whom is wearing a very 80s style aviator shades, which could only be worn in the 80s. Gotta love one of the things I'd love to watch is this movie with my family. And just kind of have them look over, like, man, look at all the stuff we used to wear back in the 80s. I also love a little funny thing that, again, these are just kids, but that just noting that they're just kids, because Elliot's like, Robert MacNaughton playing Michael is driving the van, and as one of the storylines that I mentioned earlier, he doesn't have his license. So he technically, shouldn't be driving. And one of the things he's saying is like, yeah, they got to give me my license. Oh, my gosh. Oh, my gosh. Now, sorry, that was just a funny scene with Drew Barrymore. if I ever stop talking, there's like a pause in like the middle of a statement. That means there's a funny scene I'm watching. But again, what I was saying earlier is like, Michael, the older brother, is like, he's still learning to drive, and they're saying meet us at the park, and Michael doesn't like. Michael tells his friends meet us at the park, and he asks Elliot, he's like, well, where's the park? He's like, well, I don't know. Mom always drives. I don't know. Mom always drives this. And he sounded like Butters there from South Park. I don't know. I think Mom always drives us to the park there. And you can also notice that Michael's really bad at driving. Now this scene, this little instance right here, there's like a scene in like E.T. in like a white robe, and I think there's been like some people that have linked that to like more of a spiritual thing, like maybe Jesus is it's like E.T. is like a Jesus figure, which I've never really thought of it like that. He's just kind of wearing like a little white robe there. So, of course, I don't really tend to look into movies very much like that, but I love the interactions between Michael and Greg. Now, interesting here, this is so one of the things that is going to come up later in the scene here. So now we're starting the chase scene, but one of the things that was said, that there was a little scene where like the government had a whole bunch of officials and police officers running up to the van, and Elliot's mother was yelling, "No guns, no guns!" And that was one thing that Steven Spielberg actually stated later when he was kind of recutting the movies. That was his only regret in the movies, the use of guns. Mainly because, like, at least for him, like, as he became a father, and he became, involved with children a lot more, he became really, sensitive about the issue, which is why in the 20th anniversary edition, if you notice, if you really look at the film there, I mean, they actually edit the guns out, something that Spielberg was very passionate about when re-releasing the movie. So. However, the version I'm watching is actually the original '82 version with the guns, and when Spielberg did re-release the movie and they did edit the guns out, it did have a lot of blowback, and there was a lot of people that did not like it because it was him being too politically correct. My idea about the whole thing is that you want the movie to be released as it was before, and if you want to make changes to it, I mean, that's not a bad thing. But at least to let the original version be able to be seen, which not only did Spielberg release the original version with the 20th anniversary, but he also released it. But now with the Blu-ray version, it's the original version's the only one you can get, and the 20th anniversary is actually out of circulation. A stark contrast to how George Lucas handled Star Wars, because now you can only get the altered versions on Blu-ray. So the chase scene here, government officials are chasing after the kids, and then there's going to be another scene right here. And right now, with they're brandishing shotguns to threaten the kids, and then E.T.'s eyes, the pupils dilate, and then they fly. Which I really like the reactions of the kids here when they're just like they go up, they're like, "Oh my gosh, we're flying!" I also love the stunned look of just what of the adults' faces on them. So. And these scenes here are it's really funny looking at them in HD up close, because you can tell that they're 80s effect shots, where they had to mat the kids in. They had to photograph the kids into the frames here, so you can definitely, it's like a blue screen effect, so you can really see like the outlines of the kids there against the background of the frame. So. And I know I just talked over the entire chase scene. Again, this is my favorite part of the movie. And the main reason with that is the music, I mean, the music basically from when they start the chase scene to basically the end of the movie is just, in my eyes, just, perfect. So, and so now the spaceship has come back for ET, and it is currently landing. Now, as I've stated many times in recording this film was made in continuity, in chronological continuity order. And what that means is that this scene here that we're about to see, this was the last scene that was shot, I believe, with the kids. They may have done some other scenes with maybe adults after the fact, but at least in terms of shooting with Henry Thomas, who plays Elliot, Robert MacNaughton, who plays Michael, Drew Barrymore, that plays Gertie. This is the last scene that they shot right here, and you can tell that in the scene again you get the raw emotions that of their saying goodbyes, because again you notice that this is the last time they're going to see E.T. So. I'm also looking at a really dated effect shot of the boys looking at the spaceship landing. So, again, that was also another thing that Spielberg looked at when re-releasing for the 20th anniversary, was his just kind of redoing some effect shots, that he didn't really like. Now, I don't really mind that. I don't really mind doing the effect shots. I just really, whenever. And this is, I know, and E.T. has gotten into this controversy of, versions of films that are allowed to be, that are versions of films that are available, and doing alterations to films. The Star Wars saga is really probably the most popular example of that. But E.T. has gotten that same treatment. The only difference is the thing with E.T. is that we can still see the original theatrical cut. That's the version I'm watching right now. In a difference with Star Wars, which I actually will talk about Star Wars when I watch Star Wars. But, you can't get the original version now. The only versions you can get, on Blu-ray or Disney Plus are the altered versions of Star Wars. So... And again, I'm talking about this whole versions of film. It got really controversial. I mean, Spielberg. It actually was kind of funny because there was a South Park episode kind of lampooning the whole alterations to E.T. and it was kind of funny in the movie, the officials who were supposed to be threatening them with guns actually were using walkie-talkies. It's I know how to use this, but again, it was funny. And again, this last scene here. This is going back to the it's kind of like a reverse Close Encounters of the Third Kind kind of deal. The spaceship is landing, the alien is going back up into the spaceship. However, and it even says here, Elliot, he can't go in the spaceship. He has to, the ET even says come. And then Elliot, says, stay. He doesn't. He just says, I can't go with you. So, and then, really heartfelt scene here. E.T. and Elliot, hugging it out. So, and Drew Barrymore's crying too. So, man, I might get some tears here myself. And then the scene that was actually featured very famously in the re-release trailer of E.T. saying "I'll be right here," which they actually redid special effects wise in the 20th anniversary, where he holds his finger up in front of Elliot's face and he shines it, and he says "I'll be right here." And the version that I'm watching right now, it looks different than the one that they did in the past. So, and also just again, I love the music that's just playing here. So, And again, this ending always gives me goosebumps. I mean, it's one of my favorite endings in a movie because the difference of score, and it's the combination of score and the emotions that you've gotten, saying goodbye to a good friend, because that's what Elliot's doing here. He's saying goodbye to E.T. So on the note, and also the kids are watching as well. So now again, as a lot of people that have seen E.T., the film ends with the ship flying up into the space and creating the rainbow, and we get a last second shot of Elliot. There actually was an alternate ending with Elliot kind of being playing Dungeons and Dragons, and he's kind of the I believe the dungeon master, and he's playing with Michael and his friends, and he's having a good time and whatnot. And then the scene cuts to the roof of their house, and it actually shows the contraption, the communications contraption still sending messages out. So it kind of seemed the original, not an original, but the alternate ending. It ends on kind of a lighthearted note in which that they're gone, but E.T.'s gone, but at least they're still kind of communicating with each other. But again, this ending here, it's maybe, I think at the end of the day, Spielberg was like, well, it doesn't really matter if they get back together. I mean, it's about the journey, I think, is what's most important. So, and again, this last seconds of footage here just gives goosebumps every single time. So, and so just watching the last seconds here. I mean, I don't have a whole lot to say. It's just a great ending, great movie. So, and that's it. That's the end. So E.T., the Extra Terrestrial. And again, this movie was, I'd say probably for Steven Spielberg, and I've actually watched a whole lot of interviews with Steven Spielberg. He says that it's this movie and Schindler's List that are actually the two most personal movies for him. This movie being almost autobiographical because, again, it's the idea behind it is, him telling kind of the story of his, parents' divorce and kind of how lonely he was as a child, and even how he was, even as he was as an adult. I mean, one of the things that he said when he was making Raiders of the Lost Ark was, I'm far away from my family. I feel lonely. I mean, he's again, the thing that we've learned about Steven Spielberg is, he's not definitely, he's got a very personal side to him, and I think that's what makes a lot of his movies really good. Is that he has a lot of heart, and he puts a lot of his heart in his movies, and I think that's ultimately why he's become one of the most renowned directors of all time. I mean, he's made some of the greatest movies ever. Jaws is an example. This movie, a great example. Jurassic Park, Schindler's List. And I know the Indiana Jones movies are, more of action, kind of, some people call them kind of dumb movies, but at least for me, they're they're personal favorites. So, yeah. And there never was a sequel to E.T. I did say that there was a a kind of unofficial sequel to it, but in terms of making a feature-length sequel to E.T., I mean, Steven Spielberg even said it himself. I mean, y'all, we've created almost the perfect movie. I mean, he even said it himself. It's the greatest movie that he ever created. Up until when he made it. So he decided to kind of just leave it be alone. It's like, y'all, we have a great self-contained movie here. We're not going to ruin it by, going out and making, a sequel. So, again, that's kind of a bit of the impetus there. And they actually had, ideas for sequels. I mean, they were going to make, there was going to be a sequel idea in which, Elliot and, his friends would get kidnapped and, E.T. would kind of have to come to the rescue. But Steven Spielberg never really liked the idea. It never really came to an idea that he liked, so he just kind of left it alone. And the thing with E.T. is that it actually really marks a change in Steven Spielberg. and it takes a couple years to really notice, but up until this point, you look at the movies that he had made. He had made Jaws. He had made Raiders of the Lost Ark. And then he also made the first movie he ever directed, The Sugarland Express. But the thing a lot of the movies that he made before that, they were on some kind of on some kind of levels, they were kind of juvenile. They were made by a young man, made for not made like for grown-ups. And while E.T. is a kids movie, it's not made specifically for grown-ups. Again, Steven Spielberg, he said himself he never had any idea that E.T. would be a financial hit, and ultimately it became the highest grossing film of all time. It overpassed Star Wars in that regard. But again, E.T., it gave Steven Spielberg kind of the impetus to start creating some of these more grown-up movies. Some of those movies such as The Color Purple, The Amistad. Indiana. Some would say that Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade is one of those kind of quote-unquote grown-up movies that he's made. But because that, and then also Schindler's List is another great example of that. But it really, none of those movies I don't think would have happened if Spielberg had made E.T. And not only that, but it also was it also changed him personally as well, because before E.T., Steven Spielberg was not comfortable with the idea of having kids. He was, I think it took a while before he actually, met his eventual wife. He actually met his future wife, I believe. I forget if she was an actress. I forget her name, but she played, for you movie buffs, she played Willie Scott in Indiana Jones in the Kingdom of the Crystal Indiana Jones in the Temple of Doom. Kate Capshaw Spielberg, that's her name. And and they met about a year or two later when they were filming the Temple of Doom, and Spielberg cites this movie as the reason why he wanted to have kids, because he had to look over all these kids during the production. He had to look Drew Barrymore, and then he basically became a father on set. And Drew Barrymore even talks about it nowadays, that how Steven Spielberg is still looked up. She still looks up to him as a father figure. So and that is basically all I'm gonna say on this movie. The movie is over. The credits, I've talked through the credits now, and that is basically it. Again, thank you all for listening. Again, I want to give another shout out to my good friend Kelly for recommending this movie. And stay good out there, y'all, and I will see you on the flip side.